The Mayor and City Council welcome you to the Peoria City Council meeting. As a courtesy to others, please silence all phones. If you would like to address an issue that is on the agenda, or if you would like to speak to the Council regarding a non-agenda item, please complete a speaker request form, which can be found in the front lobby of the Peoria City Council chambers or in the tray to the left of the speaker's podium. Please place the completed speaker request form in the second tray to the left of the speaker's podium labeled Request to Speak. All speakers will have 3 minutes to complete their comments. A countdown clock is easily visible on the left side of the wall behind the City Council dais. Only items listed on the agenda may be addressed by the Council. Since items presented as part of a speaker's request have not been listed on the agenda, and due to the requirements of open meeting laws, the Council will be unable to respond to items presented as part of the speaker's request. However, please be aware that your comments will be noted. The speaker's name will be called to speak at the appropriate time, in the order that the forms were received. Thank you for your interest and participation in the Peoria City Council meeting.
Good evening. Peoria City Council meeting will now come to order. Please rise for a moment of quiet reflection and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Edwards.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk will please call the roll.
Mayor Carlett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Patena.
Here.
Councilmember Binsbacher.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Hunt.
Here.
Councilmember Leone.
Here.
Council Liaison Acosta.
Here.
Council Liaison Gatrost.
Here.
Welcome to the Peoria City Council meeting of November 7th, 2017. We are going to begin this evening with a proclamation recognizing Peoria as a Purple Heart City. Before I come to the front and read a proclamation along with Councilmember Patena, I just want to tell you a little bit about what it means to be a Purple Heart City. So some background on this. The Purple Heart is specifically a combat decoration, and it is our nation's oldest military medal. It was first created by General George Washington in 1781 and was known as the Badge of Military Merit, and it is the predecessor of the Purple Heart Medal. The Purple Heart is awarded to members of the armed forces of the U.S. who are wounded by an instrument of war in the hands of the enemy, and posthumously to the next of kin in the name of those who were killed in action or die of wounds received in action. The heritage it represents is sacred to those who understand the price paid to wear it. So we are going to come down in front now, and I am going to ask 4 gentlemen who are here with us this evening to join us in the front, and that is Mr. Ron Kapek, Mr. Robert Metzig, Mr. Elmer Short, and Mr. Jerry Lawrence Crosby. It is an honor to have you here this evening. We are thrilled to be a Purple Heart City in the city of Peoria, and so I'm going to read a proclamation to you. Stand by. City of Peoria Proclamation. Whereas the city of Peoria, Arizona, has a great admiration and the utmost gratitude for all the men and women who have and are selflessly serving their country and this community in the armed forces. And whereas veterans have paid the high price of freedom by leaving their families and communities and placing themselves in harm's way for the good of all. And whereas the contributions and sacrifices of the men and women who serve in the armed forces have been vital in maintaining the freedoms and way of life enjoyed by our citizens. And whereas many men and women in uniform have given their lives while serving in the armed forces. Whereas citizens of our country have received the Purple Heart Medal as a result of being wounded while engaged in combat with an enemy force, construed as an admirable act of essential service, and whereas the City of Peoria seeks to remember and recognize veterans who are recipients of the Purple Heart Medal. Now, therefore, I, Kathy Carlett, Mayor of the City of Peoria in the state of Arizona, do hereby proclaim Peoria, Arizona as a Purple Heart City, honoring the service and sacrifice of our nation's men and women in uniform, wounded or killed by the enemy while serving to protect our freedoms. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Peoria, Arizona, to be affixed this 7th day of November 2017.
Kathy, I want you to know how precious it is for us to be here in the city of Peoria with such history as it has. And I'd like to thank you for your proclamation. And we, as the Department of Arizona, accept your proclamation and now declare that you are a Purple Heart City. And on the Purple Heart Trail, a national Purple Heart Trail, and we'd like for you to go to the map sometimes and see your star on the Purple Heart Trail.
To do that, thank you. Thank you, this is such an honor.
Thank you.
Well, that was truly an honor. All right, we will now proceed to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes items that require a public hearing. If there is any member of the public present who wants to address a public hearing on the consent agenda, please complete a speaker request form and place it in the bin next to the speaker's podium. This item will then be removed from consent and heard during the normal course of the regular agenda. Is there a member of the public who would like to address something that is on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none. Council, are there any items to be removed from consent? Is there a motion?
I'll motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. And the consent agenda passes unanimously. Now move on to new business. Item 15R, this is a public hearing, code amendment, zoning ordinance, section 21-813, wireless communication facility. Mr. Tyne?
Great, thank you. And we have Chris Hawkes, our Planning and Community Development Director, as well as Cody Gleason, a Senior Planner, here to do the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Item 15R is a city-initiated amendment to the zoning ordinance pertaining to wireless communication facilities, or as otherwise known as cellular facilities. So to my right is Cody Gleason. He's a senior planner with the Planning Department. He's the content lead on this code amendment. So what I'll do is provide a brief introduction, and I'll turn it over to Cody, and he'll go through the amendment for you. So as you know, from time to time, the council sees requests for proposed changes to our zoning ordinance. In most cases, they're city-initiated. Some of the code amendments that we do are preempted by changes brought by, it could be by a court decision, like our sign code effort that's going on. Sometimes they're due to changes in regulations at the state or federal level. This amendment happens to be prompted by a recent FCC order that has changed regulations. So we'll talk about the changes from the FCC order. In some regard, it preempts some of our local authority and how we look at changes to existing cell tower facilities. So really, there are three parts to our amendment that we'll talk about tonight. There is the new language that we're introducing to comply with this new FCC order. And then while we're doing the update, we thought we would make some minor updates to some of the standards. We'll talk about that. And then finally, like our effort with the sign code, we're looking to improve the overall usability of the code. So you'll probably note it in our presentation where today there's dense text. We're trying to reformat that into a format that's much easier to access. Before I turn it over to Cody, I thought it'd be important to lay the groundwork and just talk about how our existing ordinance works. Largely, we're keeping the ordinance intact. It's been in place since 1998. It's served us well. It's got good provisions, but for the format change and the FCC order, the general framework of it will remain untouched. So the way our code works today is it promotes co-location. So when a new cell facility comes in, we try to encourage that they locate on an existing pole or an existing vertical element in the city. So we require them to go out and do an inventory of existing facilities. And to the extent that's not possible, we ask them to demonstrate why or how that can't be done. And sometimes it's on the basis of the technology and the radio frequency signal that they have to provide to their customer. We also have codes also devised to promote what we call context-appropriate camouflaging. And what I mean by that is that how can we disguise the cell tower facility to fit in with the community? Now, what we largely see in Peoria is we see monopalms or we see monopines. And when I say context-appropriate, for example, we would not want to see a monopalm, say, somewhere out in the desert where it's just not, it's out of context, and then it ends up drawing more attention to the cell facility. So that's what we try to promote in that regard. We also have placement restrictions, meaning the cell tower has setback requirements from residential. As you would imagine, they're greater for residential. We have requirements for setbacks from historic sites and also in our hillside areas as well. And so when we look at cell facilities, they're either permitted outright or they require a conditional use permit. They're conditionally permitted. And so what that means is we've got standards that they have to meet. If for some reason, given the site constraints or the context of the area, they can't meet those specific standards, then it goes through a public hearing process, and that allows the neighborhood to participate, allows the staff to also address some of those specific issues, and so it could be permitted in that manner as well. So that's how the existing ordinance is laid out. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Cody. He's going to go through starting with the FCC order.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Thank you for having me. As Chris referenced, there's kind of a couple parts to this particular text amendment, the focal point of which is the FCC order that we wanted to ensure compliance with. So FCC Order 14153 identified certain criteria that basically jurisdictions have to allow for regardless of what their standards are. As we proceed, I'll be covering the specifics of really what they're looking to allow and what that means for our regulations of the facilities. So the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. They were created in 1934 through the Communications Act for the purpose of regulating not only interstate communications via radio, television, but they've evolved as technology has to address wireless communication facilities as well. With that FCC order that I referenced, they placed a requirement that basically we have to provide an allowance for what is deemed a non-substantial change. So when something is viewed as innocuous in accordance with that order, it's basically allowed to just proceed to any applicable building permits. There's no separate planning process for it. What is a substantial change? In the order, they do make a point to identify those substantial changes which state specific height allowances and also width allowances. So height being the height of the overall facility and width being that array that you generally see at the top of a facility holding their typically panel antennas. Again, the purpose of that change is to allow for what they've identified as minor modifications and that they anticipate having a minimal impact on the community, so improving efficiency in that manner. Currently, our ordinance doesn't have a specification for, in the order it's called substantial change, but anything really akin to that. We have standards for new facilities, and we have standards for facilities that are mounting on existing verticalities, but nothing that says, well, you're coming in here and you want to increase the height of an existing facility in order to accommodate, be it more carriers or a higher height for the antenna. Currently, unless it is a like-for-like swap, meaning you're taking a 3-foot antenna and replacing it with a 3-foot antenna, then you would have to go through a separate planning process. In order to ensure compliance with that FCC order, we wanted to make change to accommodate for those requirements. Again, being the increase of 20 feet in height and the increase of 20 feet in width. With that, we wanted to provide a caveat identifying that if those increases change the concealment or the stealth that Chris was referring to with, say, a monopalm or a monopine, then at that point it is deemed a substantial change, because really you're taking away the capability of that facility to blend in with its surroundings. So ultimately we wanted to be able to review that and ensure that it's contextually appropriate for the area. Here you have a kind of proportional example of what that height change looks like. Typical facilities that come in are anywhere between 50 and 65 feet. In this instance, you have a 65-foot existing wireless facility. That allowance that the FCC order creates allows them to go up to 85 feet without an additional approval via planning. They would just be able to proceed to any applicable building permits, whether that's electrical, structural, whatever's necessary to get the facility up and going. Here, again, is a representative example of what a width increase in those standards would look like. So here you have a 65-foot facility, 4-foot wide array. I'll come back to the 4 feet in a minute. We've implemented some standards in that regard that I want to touch on, but what that non-substantial change looks like is increasing it to 24 feet in width from that 4 feet. So the second part of it is really kind of the city staff's goal of whenever we do an amendment, we want to make sure that we're correcting any inadequacies that we see and anything that we feel might need to be updated. Additionally, we want to ensure user-friendliness of the code. It doesn't do us much good if no one's willing to read it. So we want to be able to have someone be able to look at it and evaluate whether or not it applies to their particular situation and really kind of go through it relatively easily instead of constantly questioning, I'm not sure if this is helping me or what I need to do in this situation. So one of the minor modifications that we made to our code standards was for antenna width maximums. That's that 4 feet that I was referencing previously. The reason that we instituted that was really to give a starting point when they come in for a substantial change. Currently, we had no maximum width, so we had no starting point. If a facility came in with a 20-foot wide array, if they were approved, then they can add 20 feet onto that. We certainly didn't want to see that. Our goal is always to have contextually appropriate standards that fit within the area. So in evaluating that, we looked at 6% as an appropriate maximum for that width. So again, on a 65-foot facility, that provides for that 4 feet in width. On a 50-foot facility, as referenced here, it would equate to 3 feet. One of the other standards that we wanted to implement was an increased setback from residential when facilities are being placed in non-residential zoning districts. So when you have a commercial center that abuts single-family residential, oftentimes you'll see a wireless facility placed in that commercial center. We wanted to ensure that basically the setback, the buffer that we're providing between those uses is appropriate, and we felt that increasing that allowed for accommodation of appropriate scale with respect to the single family and or any other residential use that may be abutting a commercial center. So what that increase looks like on a 65-foot facility, you'd be taking the setback from 71 feet to 85 feet. Again, we did a proportional standard here to ensure that our regulations are appropriate. As the tower grows, we wanted that distance to grow so that you have something that's contextually appropriate for the area and not out of scale. The other half of this second part of the update is really making it more user-friendly. We identified the standards that we wanted to change, but now we wanted to evaluate what can we make it look like without having someone fall asleep while they're reading it. So we wanted to ensure that you have those easy standards to look at and you are able to easily identify what you need for your particular facility without reading through standards that maybe don't apply and or might be redundant. What that looks like is on the left here, you basically have what our current standards are. We have 3 different categories of somewhat overlapping regulations. We have general standards, principally permitted, and conditionally permitted. In each of those, again, they have a redundancy about them that they're trying to incorporate the kitchen sink into each different category. We wanted to provide a sequential process so that when someone's looking at it, they know exactly what the path is that they need to go down, and they know what the standards are in their particular situation. Along with that comes graphics. The old adage is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So why did we have a document with absolutely no pictures? We also found that providing those graphical representations made it a lot easier for the user when evaluating what are we actually talking about here? What is this standard? So when we say maximum pole height, do we mean the structure holding the antennas? Do we mean the antennas themselves? We're talking about overall facility as represented here. We also wanted a picture of stealth facilities. So oftentimes, I think everyone's probably seen the bad examples of a monopalm or a monopine where the antenna array is well beyond any camouflage ability. We wanted to visually represent what is adequate as far as we're concerned and what really represents a stealth facility and camouflaging that's appropriate. So here is an example of just one of the sections of our code. As you can see, it's a little wordy. Our hope was to not necessarily take away from the regulations that we had, but synthesize them down so that it is user-friendly. This would give you the impression that all of these standards are applicable for this particular situation, which is not the intended case. So we wanted to make that more visually presentable when you're reading through it. What we boiled that down to was this. We felt it was a little bit better, a little bit easier to digest, and ultimately provided all of the regulations that we were looking for through that text-heavy portion of the document. This provides users an easy way to see, okay, this is my height, this is my width, this is where I can place it. With that, staff's findings are that the zoning ordinance amendment as proposed would ensure compliance with the FCC order while also amending the ordinance to allow for enhanced usability by really any member of the public, be it applicants or the general public. As a result, staff recommends that the council concur with the planning and zoning Commission recommendation to adopt ordinance 2017-44, approving changes to Chapter 21 of the Peoria City Code pertaining to wireless facilities. And with that, if you have any questions.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Finn?
I actually do have a question. I might have not understood it correctly, so I just want to get a clarification. So I think what you said was it was 10% or 20 feet, whichever is greater. Is that correct?
That's correct. The reason for that is we were simply taking the language from the FCC order, which identified those prescriptive items.
So really how that breaks out mathematically, then something would have to be at least 200 feet high or 200 feet wide for that differential to ever kick in.
That's correct. There's some jurisdictions that may have considerably higher height maximums than we have.
Okay.
In our particular situation, the 10% would really never come into play. I believe the highest facility that we have in the city is 110 feet, and that was approved under really old standards.
So for us, it's always going to be the 20 feet.
Correct.
Well, I'll be darned. I didn't understand it correctly. Okay, thanks.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Cody, can you go back to the picture with the palm trees? There you go, perfect. So does this ordinance only apply to the palm trees, or does this apply to church steeples as well? Because I know there's quite a few churches out there that are going into contracts with some of these towers or these companies to build faux church steeples.
Sure, Mayor, council members. This is just merely intended to be a graphical representation. This is not the extent of all stealth or camouflage facilities. The idea is just, with the commonly used ones we wanted to identify, really this is what we're looking for. And ultimately, if they're using a different alternate facility, then the idea would be to extrapolate that.
Is there different criteria for churches as far as setbacks? And because if I'm not mistaken, when there was one going up over off 107th and Williams several months ago, because it was a church, it was deemed a little bit different, and so some of the regulations were not as stringent as what we're seeing here. And I may be wrong on that, but if I remember speaking with some residents, they were concerned about that.
Sure, Mayor, council members, the churches have an allowance for certain height exceptions for belfries, steeples, those sorts of things, but ultimately the wireless facility that's contained within those items has to be at our height maximums until they hit that substantial change criteria.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hunt?
On the same picture, as you mentioned, we do already have some of these fake palm trees around where the facility goes outside. Is this retroactive? Can we have them change those, or are we stuck with those until they desire to make some kind of change?
Mayor, council members, this would not be retroactive. So basically any facility that's currently existing would be allowed to continue until such time as they made modifications to it. So in a situation where they're making it no longer stealth and or exacerbating the issue of it not being stealth, then that would be a point of that item that I referenced where it would be deemed a substantial change and they would have to come in for additional approvals.
Okay, too bad.
All right, thank you. I declare this public hearing open. So this is a public hearing. Is there any members of the audience who care to address this issue? All right, seeing none, I declare this public hearing closed. Councilor, are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item is also a public hearing. This is 16R, Harvest Church Annexation, 8340 West Northern Avenue. Mr. Tyne?
Great, thank you. And Mr. Hawkes will do a presentation on this. And again, just a reminder, no council action is required on this item.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Agenda item 17R. This is a proposed annexation filed on behalf of the Harvest Church, which is requesting annexation into the city. The church is currently located within an unincorporated Maricopa County island, so it's identified in the brown color on the screen there. It's in red there. It's generally located west of the northwest corner of 83rd Avenue and Northern. The church was established in the late 1990s through the 2000s. It's grown in size over the last several years. The property that the church sits on is about 10.5 acres in size. The general properties in the area to the north are some large lot single family in the county island area. To the west is our large retention basin. And the property to the east that's in the city currently, that says City of Peoria, that's immediately east of the Harvest Church, that property is 5.5 acres. That's owned by Harvest Church, so they have plans to incorporate that property into their as they expand the church into the larger church property. So the church is desirous of annexation into the city for several reasons, namely water and access to water and sewer services, but also public safety. Now this graphic illustrates the annexation process. The state statute defines the annexation process for us. It starts with a blank petition that's filed with the county recorder, and that filing sets forward a 30-day period upon which we can, before we can release the petition for signature, we have to hold a public hearing. That's the reason for tonight. So tonight is, as Jeff indicated, hold a public hearing, take testimony. We can't take any action tonight. But after the end of the 30-day period, we have up to 1 year to get signatures that meet these standards. We have one property owner, so it shouldn't take very long. And so the objective would be that if we move forward, that we would bring that back to the council for final action, probably in the near future. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? All right. I declare this public hearing open. Is there a member of the public who would like to address this issue? All right, seeing none, I will declare this public hearing closed. And there is no action by the council this evening. So that is all. We will now move on to item 17R, contract approval and budget transfer, Beardsley Road channel improvements.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Adina Lund, our engineering director, will provide for this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to provide a brief overview on the Beardsley Road Channel Improvement Project. This is item 17R on your agenda. I'm going to make it very brief. The project is located along Beardsley Road. The channel is on the south side of the road and extends from Lake Pleasant Road west to 111th Avenue. This project is a regional drainage feature that receives stormwater from not only Beardsley Road, but also the surrounding communities. The maintenance and aesthetics of this channel has been discussed at length between the adjacent communities and the city for probably 15 to 20 years. I'm sure you've heard about the project. The picture at the top shows the existing condition of the channel on the south side of Beardsley. The rendering below represents the planned improvements, which include new storm drain pipe, an 8-foot detached sidewalk that meets all the current ADA standards. We're also installing almost a brand new traffic signal at 107th and Beardsley. This will include flashing yellow arrows and video detection. This has been asked for by the neighbors for a long time. Additionally, we've worked with the neighborhood to update the landscaping to a desert palette. This includes shade trees along the new pedestrian pathway. This is a very important feature that should get people out recreating, as we hope to see. Speaking with the contractor, we have confirmed construction will start after the first of the year. We'd like to avoid the holidays as much as possible, and it will continue through September of 2018. I'm going to try to briefly cover the contractor selection process, which is not a brief process at all. We work with the finance department, specifically with materials management, and we do a low bid selection process. That means we advertise and we get bids from as many contractors as possible. In this case, we had 6 responsive bidders. The bids range from $3.3 million to $5 million. Blue Core Contracting is the low bidder with the price of approximately $3.3 million. Next, I'm going to move into the project funding, which is somewhat complicated. The available funding is $3.1 million. $2.9 million is coming from the Beardsley Channel project. Because of the extensive improvements at the signal, $250,000 will be coming from the traffic signal program, as that's the appropriate source of money. We are also have an agreement with Ventana Lakes, and they will be paying for the removal of all of the existing landscaping in the area. Additionally, we have other contracts to write for about $104,000. These contracts cover as-built, materials testing, public engagement. So when you add all those numbers together, do the math, we have a $210,000 budget shortfall for the low bidder. We have analyzed the bids over and over to see why this has occurred. And looking at many of the bid items, we're starting to see an upward swing in unit costs. Some of these are for traffic control items, traffic signal items, landscaping items. So we're going to monitor this with our next upcoming solicitations. We're a little concerned, but we're going to keep our eye on it. So we're asking for the overage, and we're also asking for a 10% construction contingency. This is standard for all of our projects. We do not anticipate spending 10%, but we don't want to come back every time we need $500 or $50 for something. With that, we are requesting a vote on the following items: the approval of the construction contract with Blue Core Contracting and the budget transfer of $540,000 from the Union Hills Channel project. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Council, questions or comments? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Dina, I want to thank you and your staff and Andy and Jeff. You guys have done a phenomenal job of wading through this over the years. I know in the 5 years that I've been on council, this has been in the forefront of almost every discussion I've had with Ventana Lakes. And so they are extremely anxious to get this started and completed. We had a meeting, or you guys held a public meeting just last Thursday, and the enthusiasm and the attention is still present today as it was 5 years ago when I first got involved in this. And so I just want to thank you and your staff for doing a phenomenal job working with Ventana Lakes. They are extremely happy with the outcome that's about to begin. And so again, thank you so much. I definitely approve this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
I would. I'll make a motion for approval of 17R.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. And it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move on to the Vistancia West Community Facilities District Board meeting. And there are 2 items on the consent agenda this evening. They are approval of the minutes from the August 15th, 2017 meeting and the acceptance of the investment report, quarter ending September 30, 2017. Board members, are there any items to be removed from consent? Right, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second. Board, please vote. Consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we will move on to call to the public for non-agenda items. And I have received no speaker request forms. So we will move on to reports from City Manager. Mr. Tyne.
Great, and thank you, Mayor and Council. Just real quickly, one quick reminder or observation. In the consent agenda, you might have seen that there were a couple of grants that were approved in our public safety area. Included in that is for our law enforcement. It was a Department of Justice Justice Assistance Grant that will be provided for funding crisis intervention and mental health training to all police department personnel, training such as de-escalation techniques, crisis response, and mental health interventions. I think this is part of our continued effort to really be fully prepared to deal with these special circumstances that continue to present themselves. Other than that, the only other item we had was just our video of upcoming events, and we'll just air that now.
Thank you.
all you have. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of things going on. All right, we're going to now move on to reports from the City Council. We'll start with Youth Council Liaison Acosta.
All right, so on October 26th, Councilman Edwards and a few members from the Youth Advisory Board attended the Homeless Youth Connection Breakfast over in Goodyear. There were a lot of council members from other cities. I know I sat next to the mayor of Goodyear, I think. There were also a lot of homeless youth there that are being housed. So I actually have a story to share from one of the youth that I met because I thought it was very touching. And it was such a great example to stand against the stereotypes that are placed on the homeless population. So his name is Robert, and he's 19 years old. His home and family is in Columbia. Oh, man. Why do I always cry? I'm not going to cry this meeting, I promise. Okay, his home and family is in Columbia, but he moved here because he was offered an opportunity to play basketball. Unfortunately, because of a basketball injury, his house host abandoned him, and he was left on the streets. But thankfully for the Homeless Youth Connection, he was able to be housed, and right now he's finishing high school, and he's doing great. So I want to thank the Homeless Youth Connection. I know we're going to try to do more events with them and try to reach out to the homeless youth. But some good news, we had the Halloween Monster Bash on October 28th, and Cassidy and I were there. Councilman Edwards, I saw him. We judged the Halloween costume competition. There's a lot of kids with some great imagination and creativity, so it was a great event, very good atmosphere. A lot of people attended with their family and their kids, so that's all I got.
All right,
Thank you.
Councilmember Patena.
Thank you, Mayor. On October 25th, I attended the Park Ridge Community HOA annual meeting. For months, they've been asking us about some crime issues, and they thought that their area was getting hit with some additional crimes. And so we set up a meeting, and Commander Chuck Bizzaio came out and talked to them about crime in their area, car robberies, those types of things. Along with Commander Bizzaio, Chief Minder came out, Officers McCombs and Finney, Code Officer Evan Greenwald, and Code Administrative Assistant Melissa Alexander, and Public Education Specialist Lisa Maddox. So we had great representation from the police department, and they were able to allow that HOA to understand that their crime in the area is not so bad, and the crime in Peoria is actually down. November 2nd, I attended the Peoria Support Workshop for behavioral health at Rio Vista. It was held by Karen Imig's group, and essentially it was a mental health workshop. And you know, there's such a stigma around mental health, and there was great attendance at this event. They talked about mental health for children, for adolescents and adults. We had several people there from a bunch of other cities who wanted to see what Peoria is doing about mental health, and it was a great workshop, and I hope that we have more of those. November 4th, I won't take your thunder, Councilmember Finn, but I attended the Park Fest at Windrose Park. I'm a huge fan of Park Fest. A lot of kids, a lot of families, a lot of free events, and I hope we can continue keeping those. Yesterday, we had the City of Peoria Employees Veterans Appreciation Event. We did some rudimentary math, Jennifer Stein and myself, and we have 172 employees in Peoria who are former veterans. That means it's 14% of our total employee population. So it shows that Peoria is doing its part in hiring veterans, and that's a really good thing. This morning, I attended a grand opening celebration for the new police facility. That's quite an amazing place. If you ever have an opportunity to go out there and see it, please do that. It's the technology is second to none. This facility is going to serve the police in the North Peoria for many, many years to come. And I think the police officers and the command staff and the city should be very proud of this building. Last thing I want to mention is this Saturday at 7:30 in the morning, we're going to have a rededication of the Veterans Memorial. If you haven't been out there yet, it looks just spectacular. And I hope you have an opportunity to come out on 7:30. The mayor will be speaking, I'll be speaking, and there'll be some good events going on. So if you have the chance, please come out and visit that facility. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Binsbacher.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, too, that I attended the grand opening to the new police station this morning, and I heard, phrases like under budget, next generation, future growth, all music to my ears. It was very exciting to see that come together, and that is a huge step towards serving the future of our city. So congratulations to our police department and staff for doing such a fantastic job, amazing teamwork on that project. There are a lot of veterans events. In addition to being so proud of being a Purple Heart City, I am thrilled at all of the events honoring our veterans this week. It's a big week for that. We can't see enough of that. And I'm just proud of the patriotism that I'm seeing in our city. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards?
Thank you, Mayor. Want to talk a little bit about a new bus route that we have in the city of Peoria that opened up a week ago. It's the P83 bus route. It extends from Camelback Road to the south all the way up to the Arrowhead Mall. And it runs from 5 in the morning to 10 at night, Monday through Friday, and from 6 to 9 Saturday and Sunday. It's a great opportunity for residents now to connect all across this city, not only north and south, but you can also go east, west, and catch about 7 or 8 other connecting buses going through Phoenix, Glendale, obviously Peoria, the whole valley. And so it's just a great opportunity. The partnership that we worked with Valley Metro, also with Phoenix and Glendale. I just want to thank all of my counterparts out there for really seeing the need for this extension, and it just really goes to show that we're growing by leaps and bounds. We've always said it, and this is just proof that we need these additional services. And so hopefully there'll be more bus extensions to come as we grow further north. And just one last thing, the grand opening this morning was a phenomenal success at the police station. Chief Mentor, I want to commend you and your staff at Striffler and Hayden Construction. You guys did a phenomenal job of, again, coming in on budget, on time. Everybody that I spoke to thought this building was just spectacular. It's absolutely state-of-the-art, and as Bridget said, if you get an opportunity to go up and take a look at it, I highly recommend that you do so. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Finn?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to do a couple of shout-outs. On the 28th, we had our Neighborhood Pride event, and the city did an amazing job, as they always do. There were probably 500 volunteers out there again. It's just always amazing to see what can happen when a community comes together to help some people that are a little bit down and need a helping hand. So thank you to the LDS community that came out just in droves. You couldn't even find a parking spot out there to park anywhere. So that's an amazing event, and I just want to thank everyone involved from the city side and the LDS community for everything that they did. And the Park Fest, we had Windrose Park this past Saturday was fantastic. I want to thank the police department for being out there doing your normal thing with fitting helmets and giving away bicycles and making sure that I don't mispronounce the poor kids' names when I announce their names. And then I drove home and figured out that I could just really read the numbers off the back of the ticket instead of butchering people's names. So lesson learned on that one. But two great events, and I appreciate everything that the city has done and the community. One other thing that I thought was kind of neat about that Park Fest, when I called out the kids' names, you could hear parents saying, oh, little Charlie went home about 10 minutes ago. Everybody knew each other. They were looking out for each other. They knew who was at the park, who wasn't at the park. So it was really a neat Park Fest. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I know everybody said it. I'd be derelict, though, if I didn't say that that new police station is just amazing. I don't know what I expected, but whatever I expected, it surpassed it. Bulletproof glass, just amazing. They've catered to the millennials who like to work casually in groups and to others who like the cubby hole, so to speak, in. It's just they thought of everything. So police personnel, hopefully you really enjoy your new home, and I think this will also increase police presence up in the northern part of the city, and we'll have some happy police out there. Just one thing, I have a shred event coming up, a free shred event on Saturday, November 18th from 9 to 10:30. It'll be in the parking lot of the Ira Murphy Elementary School, which you can Google to see where that is. It's in my district, but it is for anybody in the city. Load up your trunk with all your files or whatever paper you have to shred. It's no charge whatsoever. There's no limit. They'll shred it right while you watch, so you'll know that your documents have been safely taken care of. And then I just think of this a lot. I really appreciate Maylee and Cassidy who come out. They come faithfully every 2 weeks. And you know what I'm hearing? They take this job so seriously. They are at events during the 2 weeks in between our meetings. They're really active. They're really leaders out there in their school communities. And I know it's fun, but I also know it's a sacrifice because you guys are both in advanced classes. You have a lot of homework. You have a lot of expectations on you from an academic standpoint. And I just really appreciate it. I appreciate the youth that come out, and you're growing into tomorrow's leaders. You really are already leaders in your own right. So thank you both. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Leone?
Yes, thank you. On October 21st, I went to Marines Corps' meeting. It was great to see all those Marines, but you know, a lot of these Marines were during the Korean War, and some was after. But you know, they all had their uniforms on. They all looked great, and I was really surprised when they get their uniforms on, they can still fit into them. But they did a great job, and I am real proud of our Marines. We have, on the 28th, we have the Halloween Bash, which is one of our great events every year. And I just hope we just keep it going and even get larger. I went to a workshop on November the 6th for the council. It was great. They did a great job, and they got a lot of things done and a lot of things completed. I went to the Employees Veterans Appreciation Dinner at the amphitheater, and it was just great to see a lot of these veterans who was there. Also, on the grand opening, like Vicki says, in the Public Works, it was great. It was a great facility, and I'll tell you, if you want to go on a tour, I'm sure the chief will take you on a tour, but it'd be nice to get 5 or 6 people together so you can take us all at once. If you haven't seen the new building, I'd advise you go down and take a look at it. It's just great. God bless all of you. God bless our first response, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Youth Council Liaison Getrost?
Thank you, Mayor. On October 28th, I got to go to the neighborhood pride event as well. There were people painting houses and shoveling gravel. I just wanted to say thank you to all of those people who were out there helping out, all the volunteers that showed up. Later on that day, I also attended the Halloween Bash. and along with Maylee, and we had the opportunity to judge the Halloween costumes. I judged the scariest Halloween costumes, and not gonna lie, that was a pretty hard decision because I too was scared myself. On November 3rd, I got to attend a Diversity Leadership Alliance along with one of my colleagues from the Youth Advisory Board, Allison Jasper. The program shined a lot of light on incivility and how to be a leader in those types of situations. Let's see. Lastly, I would like to say thank you to all the veterans for your service and hope you all have a great Veterans Day. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of Veterans Day, I do just want to say one more time that we are having our Veterans Memorial, the rededication of our memorial wall on the 11th. That's this Saturday at 7:30 a.m. It begins. And in addition to the 88-foot granite wall that we had already, we have added an honor wall to the north side of that same wall, and you can inscribe the name and rank of a loved one that you know who has served. And it's a really great place to make sure that your family is always remembered. And we have also added an additional memorial, a completely new one for veterans, or excuse me, for Vietnam veterans. And so it's going to be very, very special. It's a big grand opening, and it's going to be so worth your time if you will come there. There's a lot of other veterans events that are happening that day, but this one's going to be really special. So we hope to see you there. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.